what's crazy about The Hill is it's pretty rare to see a corporation, a corporate news outlet like The Hill, I think, so successfully break into the independent media scene. And they absolutely did that, specifically with the original iteration of Rising, Krystal and Saagar, as you mentioned. Zach, let's take a look at, again, these are not cherry picked, but this is some of the videos that used to get published on The Hill's Rising. You can see that this one got...
Could we zoom in a little bit? It's hard to see.
Again, this is just a random panel video. Zero's progressive vote against Pelosi speakership, over 100,000 views. Andrew Yang eclipses Mayor Pete. Is it a turning point? Almost 300,000 views. That was from 5 years ago, Krystal and Saagar. And again, these aren't cherry picked. This is basically just standard fare for The Hill when Krystal and Saagar were doing videos, like 94,000 views, 364,000 views. People really were digging it. I remember sometimes Krystal or Saagar would give a radar, just like a monologue. Sometimes it would crack almost 1 million views, guys. These videos were blowing up. They were really getting in the algorithm. But after increasingly deteriorating conditions, we talked about it at the time, obviously Krystal and Saagar parted ways. They started breaking points. Very successful. We've talked about that at length. But The Hill was actually miraculously able to recover regardless. That's something that at the time we did not predict they would be able to do. We talked about how it was over for The Hill. They would never be able to capture or recapture the magic that Krystal and Saagar brought to the table. But they found themselves Kim Iversen, who also was a big hit with the audience. Not a huge hit with us, but she was doing great. She was racking up millions of views, partially because she was also leaning into the anti-vax thing. But still, I mean, these videos were doing really, really well. She was getting like over 100,000 views on a regular basis, sometimes cracking 500,000, even approaching 1 million views on some radars, kind of like I was mentioning with Krystal and Saagar. Yeah, this one got 108 million views, guys. That's crazy.
1.8 million.
Sorry, 1.8 million. Yeah. And again, not a big fan of Kim Iversen, but I do think that, again, that's someone that does speak to a more independent audience, the kind of audience that they had accumulated or attracted with the original Rising show and the more independent media populist appeal, as opposed to a more corporate approach to news, the kind of stuff you see on TV. So again, they found a pretty decent replacement. Kim Iversen left because they wouldn't let her interview Dr. Fauci. But luckily, they still had Brie Joy Gray. And like you said, Zach, Brie Joy Gray, we've had some disagreements with her, but she was undeniably a really talented co-host. And I thought that her and Robbie, their dynamic actually did kind of recreate the dynamic that Krystal and Saagar originally had on the show. One left-winger, one right-winger. They got into feisty debates, but they still seemed to be chill for the most part, right? And look, Briahna, she would get a lot of views. She would get 300,000 plus views on a regular basis. She was a very big hit with the audience. Obviously, she triggered a lot of the right wingers in the audience, but people still really genuinely seem to enjoy her contribution to the show.
And that's actually a really necessary thing, right? To be able to competently trigger the right wingers in your audience. I mean, that's not something that was new, right? We saw that constantly when Krystal Ball was on Rising. I think it was a little bit more of a 50-50 split then in their audience base. There was still a lot of that Bernie Sanders momentum. But if you shuffle on over to the breaking points YouTube comment section, you'll see that there's a lot of pushback from right wingers in their commentary about Krystal Ball, and that's good. That engages people, right? That means that they're paying attention to those leftist ideas. That's upping your retention. You're not just living in an echo chamber. Saagar has something to respond to. So even though they disagree with Krystal, even if they don't know it, they appreciate her being there because it makes the content better and it makes them engage more.
Absolutely.
Same thing with Briahna, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And I think she did a great job as co-host. Again, she brought some of that spice. She brought some of that fire to the panel. It didn't become boring. That's the biggest issue that news shows run into. Politics and news, it can be kind of boring. That's why most average normie people pay attention to like anime or movies or video games or music or something that's not
gooning.
Yeah, that's something that's not politics, right? So you need someone to make it interesting. Briahna did that. Kim Iversen did that. Krystal and Saagar obviously did that, but now they're all gone. Apparently, The Hill is such a terrible company to work for that they've somehow repelled all of their talent since their launch like 5 years ago, and they've had a lot of turnout, guys. We didn't even mention Katie Halper. Katie Halper also left or was fired by The Hill. She never got as many views, to be fair, as the other people we talked about, but still they lost Katie Halper. I think they've lost a few
Friend of the show, Olayemi, used to fill in
Olayemi.
over there, but I don't think she takes the time to do that anymore because she's got her own channel. Why would she?
But either way, now let's take a look at the new iteration of The Hills Rising without any of the talent. This is what I call Rising minus the talent.
Rolls off the tongue.
And you're about to see here what the new show looks like and what kind of audience they're clearly trying to lean into and capture with their content. It's pretty pathetic, again, given how impressive the show once was in its heyday. Here's a recent segment, again, not cherry-picked. Here's the new cast. Obviously, Michael Knowles is the guest. He's not a member of the Rising crew, but I mean, come on. We have Robbie still hanging in there, obviously. But then we have Nomiki Konst. That's who they got to replace all of these formerly impressive left-wing hosts, formerly dynamic, kind of populist left-wingers. You're gonna get Nomiki Konst, one of the most boring, kind of corporate, just uninteresting, quote unquote progressives out there. Someone who was so bad that whenever she popped up on the Majority Report, it was just like, oh, tune out immediately. That's who they found to replace Brie Joy Gray, Krystal, Kim Iversen, etc. And then obviously no one else on this panel is very interesting either. I think this is Amber Duke. She's basically just like a cable news wannabe, like a reject from Fox or something. You get the sense that she is auditioning for Fox News constantly, but isn't talented enough to actually secure the gig. And that's kind of the vibe that I think everyone on Rising now gives. It's like, instead of it being an alternative, independent or kind of populist avenue, now it just seems like they're recruiting a bunch of cable news wannabes who, again, don't actually have the talent to be on cable news. So it's just like a bunch of D-list political commentators.
Well, the reality is, guys, and you make an excellent point, Gavin. This looks like crap. 205 upvotes. They have Michael Knowles on, who, even if you're just pandering to conservatives,
8,000.
Yeah, that's a huge get. You have 2 million subs, and you get a decent guest, and you're doing 8.1K. Like, if Gavin and I had a guest of that caliber from the left on, we got 8.1K, we'd be pissed. And our channel doesn't even have 50,000 subs. Okay, do you understand? It's dog shit what's happening over here. But one of the things that I think it's worth investigating is most people don't need the Hills Rising. They don't need the Hill, period, if they're actually good at their job, right? And again, I want to say this without being mean. I don't really mind so much being mean to Nomiki. She deserves it. She blocked us on Twitter. She was like, she's always been catty, and I don't really care about that, right? But, well, there are other people, like I think Jessica Burbank is probably a super nice lady, but she is, like, I think a good example of this, like, new, like, crop of commentators that definitely at this point in their career are not strong enough in their role to build an audience for themselves, right? They're the kind of people who would probably finger wag at what Gavin and I do, and they'd be like, oh, you guys aren't serious, blah, 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 because we've actually built this ourselves, and we didn't, like, go to Georgetown and then get a gig somewhere and then get a promotion and do all this stuff. No, we actually built an independent apparatus. Most people who actually have the skills to do this, they're just going to build it themselves, guys. Gavin and I, we were like, that we're not going to slave away and try and be PAs for people and then be script writers for people and then we're just going to start this and sink or swim. If people watch us, it's because we're good enough to be watched. And if they don't watch us, it's because we're not good enough to be watched. If you gave us a blank slate with like a 500K channel that was just going out regular news, Gavin and I would rebrand a show that would be engaging from two lefties to a general audience, right? You have to know who you're making content for. The people at the Hill have no idea who they're making content for, and they think that they could just, find people who look nice and can talk professionally to go out there and deliver to the news to people. There's like so many options that you have for that. Why would they do that? Why would they watch this person do it? They don't have any understanding of that, and that's why they're circling the drain, and that's why they're running themselves into the ground. And that's why the vanguard is soaring and everybody else is tanking.
Yep. And as some proof into that, let's take a look at the viewership over at the Hill, guys, because you saw what they used to post, the kind of numbers they used to post. Let's take a look now. And I will remind you guys, not cherry picking. This is also October 2nd, the day after a presidential debate and about a month ahead of the general election. This is the time to shine for a political channel. This should be the month for The Hill. This should be when they're racking up the most views they ever have. They have over 2 million subscribers. Again, this is what they seemingly created their channel for all those years ago, for a time like now, so that they could really thrive. But get a load of this, guys. Look at these terrible numbers. And I'll remind you, this channel has over 2 million subscribers, 1.7 thousand views, 4,000 views, 27 at the most out of the most recent batch of videos.
And that's over 13 hours, 22 hours, 32K. Like, guys, that video has seen most of the growth it's going to see. Max, that does 40K now. Like, that's how the YouTube algorithm works if you're making news content. Trust us, we know. But this is, I didn't even realize it was this bad, dude. They're not cracking 100K with anything. Their max end is like 60K. That's like a breakaway for them. That's like a breakaway for us. Gavin and I high five when we get a 60K video, but it's also not like unheard of. It usually happens to us a couple of times a month. And again, guys, I want to remind everyone, because the Vanguard, we're kind of well known, but we're very niche, right? So there's not a ton of you guys in our audience. You just have been hanging out with us for a long time. When we go out and we make content that's like even remotely to catch new audience eyes, we do so with 44,500 subscribers. Okay. And I just want you guys to take a look at the numbers that we get. Okay. So last night's debate, nobody watched, right? So we still walked away with 3.4 for the debate. Nervous. We did a 6.7K. And then all the rest of our content for this month, we're doing 10K, 24, 31, 55, 28, 4.1.
We're getting more views than The Hill, a channel with 2 million subscribers.
Yeah, I mean, potentially there are some where The Hill does better and some where ours do worse. But yeah,
on average, I think we're doing better.
I mean, on a per video basis, yeah, we are. I mean, and you got, you know, and that's, again, that's not anything for us to say. We're trying to grow. We want to be twice, 3 times, 5 times as impactful as the Vanguard is. We're on the up and up and up. We're hungry. We don't want to see 45.5K subscribers. We want to see 1 million subscribers. Gavin and I aren't giving up ever. Okay. But I'm just telling you, what happens is your channel starts to regress, and it's the same thing that's happening to Jimmy. Okay. The Hill's just way deeper down the mudslide.
Yeah. Well, I think also a big problem is just that they courted an audience of people who actually did like the more populist, independent flavor of news coverage that they were delivering. Yep. And again, now no one's really bringing that to the panel anymore. Nowadays, when you look at the kind of segments they're making, it's a lot of this kind of just right-wing pandering. It's not really an alternative or interesting perspective. It's just pandering. Again, there's a lot of this sort of like, you know, Biden and the Democrats are lying. And that's actually, ironically, the one video of theirs that did quite well from recently, whereas all these other ones are stuck at like 12,000 views. So it's very obvious now they're just chasing this like lowest common denominator kind of right-wing content, just pandering to the conservatives. But there's nothing interesting going on here anymore, not from the hosts, not from the editorial content perspective. It's all just garbage, which again is a shame. Not that I care about The Hill. It seems like a terrible company. Nextstar seems like a, you know, corporate news behemoth. But it is really wild to see a corporation seemingly figure it out, right? Hey, this is actually an independent coded show coming from a huge corporate news outlet that's succeeding, that's getting views, that people are actually interested in watching and that trust the perspectives that they're seeing on. All squandered, completely squandered, going from 1 million views to like 10,000 on average. That's insane. Yep. Anyway, pretty sad story, but we'll continue to cover it. Maybe they'll turn things around at some point, but it seems like it's an increasingly dead channel. I think it's gonna kind of fizzle out. They'll probably cancel the show eventually when they realize that there's not much more juice left to squeeze.